In the heart of a small, quiet town stood an old, forgotten garden. It was a place that locals whispered about but dared not enter. The roses in that garden were said to be unlike any other. They grew tall, proud, and fierce, as if each petal had a story to tell. Among them, there was one that everyone spoke of, a rose so stunningly beautiful, so vibrant, that no one could resist staring at it. But with beauty came a curse, a warning that had been passed down through generations. Beware the proud rose. As the sun set over the town, a curious young woman named Eliza found herself standing at the entrance of that very garden. Drawn by an unseen force, she was determined to uncover the mystery that had haunted the town for decades. Little did she know, her journey into the garden would change her life forever. Eliza had always been a curious soul, one who couldn't resist the allure of the unknown. The garden had been a part of the town's folklore for as long as she could remember. The elders spoke of it in hushed tones, warning the children to never step foot in the place. The roses, they said, had a life of their own. But Eliza, with her unshakable confidence and adventurous spirit, didn't believe in such superstitions. She had heard the stories, yes, but she was determined to discover the truth for herself. As she stepped into the garden, the air grew heavy with the scent of roses, thick and intoxicating. The petals of the flowers shimmered in the fading light of the day, their deep red hues almost glowing in the dimming twilight. Each rose seemed to stand taller than the last, and though they appeared delicate, there was a strange sense of power in the way they grew, as if they were silently watching her every move. Eliza walked deeper into the garden, her footsteps soft against the earth. The quiet was overwhelming, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves. She had always felt an eerie comfort in solitude, but here, in this garden, the silence felt suffocating. It was as though the very air was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Her eyes were drawn to the center of the garden, where a single rose stood taller than all the others. Its petals were a dark, blood red, and they seemed to pulse with life, as if the flower itself had a heartbeat. Eliza couldn't help but approach it. She had heard the tales of the proud rose, but now, standing before it, she couldn't understand why anyone would fear such a thing. It was breathtaking. Its beauty was undeniable. As she reached out to touch the flower, a cold shiver ran down her spine. The rose, despite its allure, felt wrong. The air around it seemed to thicken, and a strange sense of unease began to settle in her chest. But Eliza, driven by her insatiable curiosity, ignored the warning signs. Her fingers brushed against the soft petals, and in that instant, a sharp, almost invisible pain shot through her hand. She recoiled, her heart pounding in her chest. A voice, soft and whispering, echoed in her mind. "You dare touch me?" It was not a voice she could hear with her ears, but one that seemed to reverberate deep within her skull. The voice was ancient, powerful, and filled with a cold, venomous pride. Eliza stumbled back, her breath shallow, her heart racing. She had felt it, the power, the rage of the rose. But she couldn't stop herself. There was something captivating about the rose, something that called to her. She felt as if she were losing control, as though the flower was pulling her into its dark embrace. The world around her began to blur, and the once beautiful garden now appeared twisted, distorted. The roses around her seemed to lean in closer, their petals sharp like thorns, their eyes, if such things could be said to have eyes, following her every movement. Suddenly the air was filled with a chilling, bone-rattling laugh. It came from everywhere, echoing in the garden like a symphony of madness. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and the roses began to sway as if they were alive, as if they were moving in rhythm with the voice. "I am the proud rose," the voice whispered, growing louder. "I have seen centuries pass. I have watched kingdoms rise and fall. I have witnessed the fall of those who dared to challenge me. The roses began to close in on her, their stems twisting like serpents, their thorns sharp enough to pierce skin. You, child, are no different from the others who came before you. You too will fall. Eliza's heart raced as panic surged through her. She stumbled back, trying to escape, but the garden had turned into a maze, its paths shifting and changing before her eyes. She couldn't find her way out. The roses were everywhere now, their dark red petals stretching toward her, their thorns glistening like knives in the moonlight. But amidst the chaos, Eliza saw something that made her pause. The proud rose, still standing in the center, had stopped moving. It no longer pulsed with life. Instead, it stood motionless, as if it were waiting. Eliza felt an odd sense of clarity wash over her. She realized that the rose, despite its power, was vulnerable. It was dependent on the fear it instilled in others. Without that fear, it had no strength. In that moment, she understood. The proud rose thrived on the pride and arrogance of those who dared to challenge it. It had fed on the bravado of others, growing stronger with each new victim. But Eliza wasn't like the others. She wasn't driven by fear. She was driven by curiosity, and in that curiosity, she found her strength. With a deep breath, Eliza faced the rose. She reached out once more, but this time, her touch was gentle, calm. The rose, once menacing, seemed to shudder at her touch, its petals trembling as if it had never been touched with such care. And then, in an instant, everything changed. The roses around her stopped moving, the oppressive air lifted, and the garden grew still. The proud rose, no longer thriving on fear and pride, wilted before her eyes. Its once bright petals faded, crumbling to the ground like ashes. The garden, once dark and foreboding, now appeared peaceful, bathed in the soft light of the moon. Eliza stood in the center of the garden, her heart still racing, but a strange sense of calm had replaced the panic. The curse of the proud rose had been broken, not through violence or defiance, but through understanding and acceptance. As she turned to leave, the garden behind her now peaceful and quiet, she couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the greatest strength lies not in overpowering what we fear, but in embracing it with an open heart. The proud rose may have been a symbol of arrogance, but Eliza had proven that true power comes not from pride, but from the courage to face what scares us most. And in the silence of the garden, Eliza knew she had just unlocked a secret that would change her life forever. As she stepped out of the garden, she turned back one last time. The roses were gone, but the story of the proud rose would live on, passed down for generations to come, as a reminder that sometimes even the proudest things must bow before the humility of those who dare to understand them. And with that thought, Eliza disappeared into the night, leaving the garden forever changed.